What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Siepman, and coming up on today's show, we're going to be diving into what Mel Kiper had to say around the Minnesota Vikings 2024 NFL Draft, as he actually wasn't as high on it as obviously I was and most Vikings fans were. So we'll dive into his grade here in a second, but I want to get you guys involved here early on today's show. Grade the Minnesota Vikings draft for me, A, B, C, D, or F. I got to give this an A, but let me know what you guys have to say down below in the comments section. So Mel Kiper started off his article he wrote up with ESPN just addressing the Vikings' needs heading into the draft. And he had no doubt the number one key for Minnesota was quarterback, and then he actually had his second need as cornerback, and then he also had wide receiver as another big-time need for Minnesota. So that's what Mel Kiper had as the top three needs for the Minnesota Vikings. They did address cornerback in the second round with a guy like Khryee Jackson, but they didn't really address the wide receiver position. And I got to disagree with Mel to start off today's show. I don't necessarily think wide receiver was a true need heading into this year's draft. You know, you have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. We know what they are all about, but I feel like the Vikings have some sneaky receivers on this roster that maybe the common outside fan may not consider them as, true viable options to be rotational pieces in the NFL, like a guy like Brandon Powell, but more specifically like a guy like Jaylen Naylor. And obviously the stats aren't going to blow you away from last year. Hence, he only had 29 yards, but he was a sixth-round pick coming out of Michigan State a couple years ago. And I think Jaylen Naylor might be, if I had to chalk it up as the most underrated and most slept-on wide receiver in possibly in the entire NFC North, it's got to be this guy, Jaylen Naylor. Go turn on his tape, what he did at Michigan State. Super elusive, super shifty wide receiver. I think he could really step up in the slot big time this year for the Minnesota Vikings. So, yeah, would I have liked the Vikings to address, the wide receiver position, get another stud at that wide receiver 3 spot? Yes, but I didn't want the Vikings to send their limited draft capital at, in my opinion, not a true position of need. So this is where Mel Kiper lands with the Minnesota Vikings 2024 draft. He gave it a C+, a lot lower than I would have thought for what Mel Kiper had to give the Minnesota Vikings. But, hey, he gave it a C+. I got to go in the A range for Minnesota. But this is what Kiper had to say along the lines of, or talking about the Vikings drafting J.J. McCarthy in the first round. He said, "So long, Kirk Cousins. Hello, J.J. McCarthy. One of the most intriguing storylines to watch over the past 2 months was the likelihood of having to make a trade up if they wanted to get the fourth quarterback on the board. Turns out, though, they didn't need to move up as high as we thought, and they actually got the fifth passer in the class because of Atlanta's surprising selection of Michael Penix." He also wrote this, "As I wrote Thursday night, McCarthy lands in a spot with excellent pass catchers and a gifted game planner. He's going to be put in position to succeed in year one." And I've been in this camp for a while. Not only do I love J.J. McCarthy as a prospect, but he was a perfect fit for Minnesota. With him turning only 21 years old last January, I thought it would really benefit him a ton if he had the ability and the option to sit behind a, maybe not a veteran. Like, I'm not calling Sam Darnold a veteran since he's only 26 years old, but he's been a guy that's been in multiple organizations, knows the ins and outs of the NFL. So I think that was key for McCarthy in reaching his max potential, is having him the ability to sit year one. Will he do it? What will the Vikings decide to do in that spot? I'm not really too sure. But in terms of fit in the city of Minneapolis, I think it's perfect. He's obviously, a really nice guy, really well smoking, which kind of fits in well with how, Minnesotans are. So I think JJ's a perfect fit in Minnesota, and the fact that you only had to give up a fourth and a fifth round pick to move up one spot instead of the reports that we were getting early on this offseason before the draft that the Vikings may needed to have given up, a future first or a future third as well to move up to land a Michigan quarterback. They only had to give up a fourth or a fifth. So in terms of that grade, I had to give it an absolute A+. But where did Mel Kiper have a problem with the Vikings draft? Because he said, cornerback, wide receiver were big positions of need for Minnesota. So he did have a couple of gripes with how Kwesi handled this, and this is what he had to say. "My qualm about GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's class has more to do with mortgaging the future of his Minnesota roster. He made the move in March to get an extra first-round pick at number 23, which cost him a second-round pick next season." He also said, and to trade up from number 23 to number 17, he had to give the Jaguars his 2025 third and fourth And that means the Vikings have just 3 selections next year, 1 in round 1 and 2 in round 5. Definitely an issue. But he said with a rookie quarterback under center, are they really in position to go all in right now? This after they had just 2 picks in rounds 1 through 3 this season. And I disagree heavily with this. I understand, if you're looking at the Vikings draft capital next year, only having 1 first, 2 fifths, yes, that is definitely a little bit scary. But where it stands right now, the Vikings currently have $159 million to spend next season. And with now the Vikings having their franchise quarterback potentially in McCarthy, I could see them using that future first-round pick next season to get maybe a second and a third and a fourth and from another team trying to move up. So you have cap space and you have the ability to trade back now in next season. So I understand, face value, if you're looking at it from a bird's eye view, yes, it is definitely a little concerning. They only have 3 picks next season. But, man, you have a ton of cap space even after Jefferson and Christian Darrisaw gets extended. You're going to have other ways to fill out the rest of this roster. And, my gripe with Mel Kiper giving them a C+ is I think he's looking too much at the fact that, yes, we did give up a ton of future draft capital. And, yes, we did not have a ton of selections in this year's draft class. But the Vikings won the first round easily, in my opinion. You got the number 1 number 1 edge in this year's draft class in Dallas Turner, and you're able to get a potential franchise quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. What are probably the 2 most important positions in the NFL right now? It's quarterback and it's edge rusher. The Vikings addressed both those in the first round, getting 2 potential cornerstone pieces. And we look at what the Houston Texans did last season. They took C.J. Stroud at 2, Will Anderson at 3. Obviously a little different with the Vikings taking McCarthy at 10 and Dallas Turner at 17, but they got their cornerstone pieces on both sides of the football. So I think just that alone, me personally, I would give the Vikings a way higher letter grade, but obviously Mel Kiper disagreed. Now, we are going to be going live on the channel tomorrow at around 2 or 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel so you guys don't miss out. We actually just crossed over 25,000 subs, so first off, credit to you guys, and thank you guys so much. But if you guys are new here, just tuning into the channel, I would really appreciate if you guys hit that subscribe button and tune in for our live show tomorrow afternoon. Coming up next, just around the corner, we got more from Mel Kiper talking about the Khryee Jackson pick and also talking about just the overall haul the Minnesota Vikings got. But first off, guys, I want to tell you guys about today's sponsor, and that is Fanatics. If you guys go to chatsports.com/Vikings jersey, you guys can actually get your Aaron Jones and J.J. McCarthy jerseys right now. McCarthy did come out and say that he is going to be wearing number 9 for Minnesota. So if you guys want to rock that jersey at US Bank Stadium on game day, hit that link right there, chatsports.com/Vikings jersey. Get your J.J. McCarthy jersey or go ahead and get your Aaron Jones jersey, because I'll tell you what, even though I think right now J.J. will have the number 1 jersey amongst Vikings fans next season, this jersey of Aaron Jones, wearing that when the Vikes are playing taking on the Packers next season, I'll tell you what, there's probably no other jersey that I would want to wear. So head to that link, chatsports.com/Vikings jersey, and get your J.J. McCarthy and Aaron Jones jerseys today. So let's get to more around Mel Kiper of what he had to say around the Vikings 2024 draft class. He says, Dallas Turner, picked at 17, is my top-ranked edge rusher, but Minnesota had a greater need at cornerback. This defense ranked 28th in the league in passing yards allowed to receivers last season, giving up 3,000. And he said, I was a little surprised Kwesi Adofo-Mensah didn't target one of the top corners instead. He finally went corner in his next pick, but that was all the way in round 4. Khryee Jackson is a 6'3 defensive back who allowed just 1 touchdown in coverage last season. And the more I just dove into Khryee Jackson as a prospect, I'm starting to buy in on him. This was a guy that I didn't give too much attention to in the pre-draft process, and I really think he's going to work out. He had a kind of fluky career path getting to where he was. He went to a couple of JUCOs, bounced around, took 2 years off of football, went to Alabama, got suspended there, but finally had his breakout season at Oregon this past year where he was absolutely great in the Pac-12 championship, going up against Rome Odunze, new Chicago Bear, and also Jalen Polk. So the 6'4" corner, Khryee Jackson, he's a press man corner. I think he's going to be a great scheme fit with Brian Flores. As we obviously like to know, Flores is going to line 7 to 8 guys up on the line of scrimmage, and you got to pick and choose who's coming, which normally leaves your cornerbacks with no safety help over the back end. That's where Khryee Jackson excels. So I understand what Mel Kiper's saying about, I thought the Vikings would have gone corner when they traded up to 17. Maybe it was a guy like Quinion Mitchell, but they went Dallas Turner, who, again, I think is also another great scheme fit with Brian Flores, with his ability to drop back in the coverage. I think it's going to work out. So I understand what Mel was saying here, but to give the Vikings a C+ because of that, I just thought was, him undervaluing, Dallas Turner and J.J. McCarthy just as a whole as prospects. But let's get to what Mel Kiper had to say about the Vikings' 6th-round pick at the top of the 6th round. He said Walter Rouse could be Minnesota's swing tackle as a rookie. The Vikings started a run on kickers in round 6, but they took Will Riker at 203, my 3rd-ranked player at the position, ahead of the top 2. So kind of disagree there with what Mel was saying. I thought Will Riker was a great pick. But he also said this: can Coach O'Connell turn McCarthy into a top 10 passer? That's the question that will linger with this Minnesota class, which is extremely top-heavy. Plus, I'm factoring in Adofo-Mensah's mood that upended the team's 2025 draft. And obviously, this is kind of a cliche, a corny quote that a lot of people like to throw out there of F them picks, but I really do believe the Vikings were in that position to say F them picks this year. With all the cap space they will have heading into next year's free agency, plus now the ability to trade down since you do have a cornerstone on each side of the football. I get it. It's looking bleak heading into next year's draft, but let's just say McCarthy works out and he ends up being a top 12 quarterback and you got him on a rookie contract. Let's say Dallas Turner ends up being a top 10 edge rusher and immediately that's your Danielle Hunter replacement that you lost to the Houston Texans during free agency. I feel like we're going to look back on this draft class for Minnesota and end up giving it an A. A lot of this is projecting on how good this draft class could be for the Vikings, but as it stands right now, I was thrilled about it. I thought they dominated the 1st round, and I feel like that's what should get more juice instead of kind of bashing them for giving up future draft capital and not being in love with their kind of certain positions they drafted. But if you guys made it all the way to the end of today's video, if you guys could give me a skull down in the comment section so I know who all the real ones are that watch this video all the way through. So if you guys could make the comment section look like US Bank Stadium on game day and give me a skull down below. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and also thank you for having us cross 25,000 subs here on the channel. We'll see you guys tomorrow when we are live breaking down the draft class a little bit more. So we'll see you guys next time. As always, Skol Vikes.